WHGE 95.3 FM. Coming up, the Open Eye. All right, let's get them going here. All right. Those of us that indulge in or commit intellectual violence don't do so for the pleasure of mental masturbation or ego diddling. We do so because the chains of oppression on our people's minds are deep and difficult to remove. Good morning, my children of the sun. Welcome to the Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm your host, third eye optometrist, Patrice Gibbs, here to get your eye open, here to get you started. Yes, indeed. And as we always start, every generation has its purpose. Ours is to reveal the truth and reverse the brainwashing. And that's what we do right here. We will reverse the brainwashing. All you got to do is tune in. Tell your friends to tune in. Hey, let me get my disclaimer out the way. The views and opinions expressed on the Open Eye are those of the hosts, guests, and contributors, and do not reflect the policy or position of WHGE 95.3 FM, nor our sponsor, the Delaware Center for Homeless Vets. Any content provided by Open Eye's hosts, guests, or contributors are theirs and are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, company, or individual. The views and opinions expressed on... I ain't got that. All right. Let's get them going. As you know, you're a regular Open Eye listener. I like to give us some history. Because sometimes our history, they try to sweep it under the rug and make sure you don't know they're banning books and what have you. But if you tune in to the Open Eye, where history is not hidden, and the truth is revealed. Let me tell you about this gentleman I want to talk about today. Hey, Steve, I see you, bro. All right. He wasn't born in Rome. What am I talking about? He was born in Africa. He didn't inherit an empire, he took one. And when he died, he left his sons with a warning that still echoes through time. Stick together, enrich the soldiers, and despise everyone else. His name was Septimius Severus. And though history often whispers his name, the truth of his life still roars. Born in Leptis Magna in what is now Libya, Severus rose from the sun-baked coast of North Africa to become emperor of Rome. He came not from nobility, but from the periphery. A black man, a man of intellect and will, who climbed through the ranks of the Roman military in an era when ambition was a dangerous thing. When civil war erupted in 193 AD, or what we call CE, Rome was fractured and bleeding. 4 men claimed the throne, and the empire teetered on collapse. Severus saw his moment. With discipline and daring, He rallied the African legions, crushed his rivals, and marched on Rome itself, not as a servant, but as its new master. Once in power, he proved himself more than a conqueror. Septimius Severus strengthened Rome's armies, reformed its legal system, and filled its treasury. He rewarded loyalty, enforced discipline, and made the empire richer and more stable than it had been in decades. His reach extended from the deserts of Africa to the cold frontiers of Britain, where he personally led campaigns and built fortresses that still bear his mark today. But power is a double-edged sword. As his health declined, Severus turned reflective, leaving his sons with that infamous final lesson: to unite, enrich the soldiers, and trust no one. It was advice that revealed the brutal truth of empire. Power survives through loyalty and fear. He ruled nearly 20 years, longer than most emperors of his era. Yet his name is rarely celebrated. Why? Because his legacy disrupts the myth of Rome as purely European. Severus was African, a Libyan, who rose from the margins to command the greatest empire the Western world had ever known. Hey, Sherry. His story challenges the sanitized version of history that erases Africa's fingerprints from civilization's foundations. It reminds us that greatness is born in Africa, and the face of genius is more often than not black. So remember the name Septimius Severus, the African who conquered Rome and ruled the world. This is the Open Eye, where history won't be silenced and the truth remembers. Hey, boy, I see you. WHGE 95.3 FM. All right. You know, it's something how religious these people are. Yeah. You ever notice how the folks who shout the loudest about putting God back in government tend to be the same ones who forget to read the parts about honesty, humility, and compassion? They'll say, America went downhill when we took God out of the schools. But somehow they forgot that corruption, greed, and hypocrisy were already sitting in the front row. Now, they want to hang the 10 Commandments in courthouses. As if the same people cutting backroom deals, taking donations in the form of favors, and rewriting laws to protect the powerful are going to look up at a stone tablet and suddenly find some morality. The hell out of here. That's like putting a salad bar in a donut shop. The intention might be noble, but the folks inside ain't there for righteousness. And that's when it hits you. The real reason we can't have the 10 Commandments posted in the courthouse is this. You can't post, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not lie, in a building full of lawyers, judges, and politicians. It creates a hostile work environment. Yeah, sometimes the truth is harder than the punchline, don't it? Yeah. All right. You know, it's something I can think about what Dr. Clark says. And that's, it was in, it was supposed to be a debate. Dr. John Henry Clark. I only debate my equals, all others I teach. I seen this sister, she was talking about contrarianism and how it's being confused with intellectualism. And we live in an era where defiance is mistaken for depth and provocation is sort of proof of genius, where loud opinions are treated like wisdom and simply disagreeing with the mainstream is seen as a form of enlightenment. Somewhere along the line, contrarianism got confused with intellectualism. Contrarianism says, if the crowd believes it, I must reject it. Intellectualism says, let me understand why the crowd believes it and whether it's true. See, there's a huge difference between the two. The contrarian seeks to oppose. The intellectual seeks to understand. The contrarian's goal is to provoke. The intellectual's goal is to reveal the truth. One is fueled by ego, the other by curiosity. And nowhere is this confusion more visible than in the rise of so-called black conservatives. Black conservatives who have turned contrarianism into a political style. They brand themselves as free thinkers, independent minds, or off the plantation. Catchphrases designed to sound rebellious while recycling the same tired talking points handed down by the very system they claim to have escaped. These individuals may disagree with other black people for thinking independently. But parroting white nationalist rhetoric in blackface isn't freedom, it's performance. It's intellectual blackface dressed up as courage. They rail against groupthink while doing the bidding of the same institutions that profit from keeping black communities divided and disempowered. Let's be clear. True free thinking doesn't mean aligning with power just because your people have challenged it. It means interrogating every system, including the ones that praise you when you parrot their propaganda. Real intellectuals question everyone's motives, the left, the right, and their own. But contrarians, they just need an audience. This new generation of contrarian conservatives use misinformation as a brand. They weaponize social media to turn ignorance into influence, sound bites into ideology. They quote statistics they don't even understand, and history they never study. Wrapping falsehoods in confidence and calling it critical thought. And because their message flatters white grievance, they're rewarded with platforms, book deals, and political invitations. But what they sell isn't freedom. It's validation for the very forces that have long tried to silence real black thinkers. Excuse me. The ones who question injustice. Real black thinkers who study, who build, the ones who know that intellectual independence isn't about who you agree with, it's about whether your ideals are rooted in truth, knowledge, and accountability. Contrarianism is easy. It's easy. It requires no research, no discipline, no self-interrogation. All you need is defiance and a camera. Intellectualism is harder. It demands humility, study, and the courage to be honest, even when that truth doesn't trend. So let's stop rewarding the loudest voices and start listening to the wisest ones. Let's call out those who confuse rebellion with reason and ego with enlightenment. Because thinking critically doesn't mean rejecting your people. It means respecting truth enough to defend it. Disagreeing doesn't make you brilliant. Thinking does. I'm Patrice Gibbs. WHGE 95.3 FM. This is The Open Eye. I know I talked about this before, but like I often tell you, you learn by repetition. And, well, let me just get right to it here. Let's talk about the King James Version of the Bible. The one so many swear is direct, unfiltered word of God. Really? Here's the truth. Most churches won't tell you. The King James Version wasn't written by prophets or apostles. It was completed in 1611, not by disciples or saints, but by 8 scholars of the Church of England, handpicked by a king who wanted a version that would strengthen his throne and silence religious dissent. Oh, and those original texts people talk about, they don't exist. The oldest manuscripts of the New Testament were written hundreds of years after the last apostle died. And there are more than 8,000 of them, and ain't no two exactly alike. The King James translators didn't even use those manuscripts anyway. They borrowed from older English translations, edited what suited them, and crafted a Bible that would please both the crown and Parliament. So think about it. 21st century Christians are calling the Word of God a 17th century royal edit of 16th century translations of 8,000 contradictory copies of 4th century scrolls, claiming to be copies of letters from the 1st century that ain't nobody ever seen. That's not divine preservation, that's political production. The power of the Bible doesn't come from the perfection of its paper. It comes from the spirit of the people who find wisdom in it. But mistaken translation for revelation is how faith turns into fanaticism. Don't let someone else's edit define your enlightenment. Truth is internal, but translation is human. How many times have you heard this question? If your slave master were not a Christian, what would you be? You ever notice whenever America starts to fall apart, racists start to feel brave again? They crawl out of the woodwork, stand in pulpits, and put on crosses like badges of purity. Then twist the Bible into a weapon of oppression. Lately, these wolves and clerical collars have been saying the quiet part out loud. They're praising slavery. They're calling for its return. And they're doing it in the name of God. Pastor Joshua Haynes, yes, the same man who advises Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War, he said, Joshua Haynes, Hegseth's pastor, he said, the institution of slavery is not inherently evil. And he said it with pride. He said every Christian should affirm and defend that belief. That's not religion, that's rot. That's what happens when white supremacy gets baptized and called holy. And then another one, Pastor Joel Webman, he went further, said black people should thank white folks for slavery. Damn. Said we ought to be grateful that we were brought to America and given Christianity. So here is my question to him and to every so-called Christian who believes that foolishness. If your slave master were not a Christian, what would you be? Would you still call the whip a blessing? Would you still say God ordained your suffering? Would you still claim that the chains around your neck were holy? See, the irony is this: the same people who claim they brought us to civilization were living in filth before they ever saw Africa. The Moors, Africans, brought light, learning, and medicine to Europe. The libraries of Timbuktu had more books than all medieval Europe combined. Long before a white man could read a Bible, Africans were studying astronomy, mathematics, and laws. That's right, Sister Sherry. Whitewashing already whitewashed history. So no, Pastor, we're not blessed by being kidnapped, raped, and enslaved. We were robbed of our land, our name, our languages, our family, and our freedom. And yet, even in chains, we built nations. We built the modern world. Our labor powered empires. Our minds created art, science, and culture that still shape humanity today. You want to talk about divine providence? The fact that we survived your Christianity, that we turned pain into purpose and faith into freedom, that's the real miracle. So when you tell me that slavery was not inherently evil, I hear the same old lie that justified the whip, the auction block, and the lynching tree. The same lie that said we needed saving from our own souls by men who had none. Let's be clear. No God of love would condone the enslavement of his children. No Jesus of Nazareth, the poor, brown, colonized rebel, would stand beside a man holding a whip. This isn't about faith. It's about power and a desperate attempt to rewrite a history that condemns them. But like I always say, the wolf is finally showing his teeth. And I'd rather see my enemy in daylight than be hugged by a fox in the dark. Because now we know who they are. And we're not playing anymore. Stay woke. This is Open Eye. All right, my children of the sun. Yeah. That's still something a lot of people don't like dealing with. Of course, you heard of AIPAC. Okay, what is it? The American Israeli political, whatever it is. You know, it's the Israeli PAC, give out money. One of the people that took the money is Hakeem Jeffries. Took $900,000. Said, oh, it's just a small percentage. And sucker need to go. Because who's the terrorist? Let's make it plain. If I walked up to your home tomorrow, armed to the teeth, and said, get out, my religion says this is mine. You call that what it is, theft by force. Now imagine I got soldiers behind me, tanks down your street, and international banking that says yes, he has the right to defend himself, while he's the one holding the gun. The one forcing you out, the one rewriting the deed to your home. That's not defense. It's domination. And it's the story of Palestine. Let's pull back the curtain on the history you're not supposed to talk about. Arizona, well, why did Hamas say no? Why did Hamas stop this war last month or whatever it was? Long before Israel was founded in 1948, there were Jewish, Christian, and Muslim communities living side by side in Palestine, trading, intermarrying, and building lives together. Jews were not strangers to the region, but the idea of a Jewish state, a nation built exclusively for Jews, was a political project born in Europe, not in the Middle East. It came out of Zionism, a nationalist movement that gained power in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The Holocaust, one of humanity's greatest crimes, were used to justify that project. But even before World War II, deals were being struck. In 1933, the Havara Agreement was signed between Nazi Germany and the Jewish Agency for Palestine, allowing German Jews to transfer assets to Palestine through German exports. Over 60,000 Jews made that move before the war ended. So the notion that Jews had nowhere to go is historically inaccurate. They had options. And Palestine was selected for geopolitical reasons, not divine destiny. When the British took control of Palestine after World War I, they promised the same land to two different people. A lot of nerve. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration publicly declared support for a national home for the Jewish people. 1917. On land already inhabited by Palestinians. That's the moment the world set the stages for decades of bloodshed. By 1948, European powers and Zionist militias like the Irgun and Haganah forced more than 700,000 Palestinians from their homes. Villages were burned, families slaughtered, entire communities erased. Palestinians call it al-Nakba, the catastrophe. Israel calls it independence. So when someone says Israel has the right to defend itself, what they really mean is the colonizer has the right to defend the land he stole. The hell out of here. You know, the world likes to act as if history began yesterday. They say, why are Palestinians so angry? Well, imagine 75 years of living in exile, stateless, and watching your homeland carved into pieces. Imagine checkpoints where soldiers point guns at your grandmother. Imagine drones over your neighborhood, bulldozers flattening your house, and a wall cutting through your farm, all while the world tells you to remain calm. And when you protest, they call it violence. When you throw a rock at a tank, they call it terrorism. But when your oppressor fires missiles, it's called self-defense. If the roles were reversed, the world would call it what it is: resistance to occupation. Because that's exactly what it is. And let's talk about a forgotten fact. Israel is not the first Jewish state. The Jewish Autonomous Oblast in Russia's Far East, established in 1934, predates Israel by more than a decade. It is 75% larger than Israel, bordered by China, and still exists today. And that's not what Western powers wanted. They didn't want a peaceful solution. They wanted a strategic foothold in the Middle East, rich in oil and trade routes. So they planted a colony and called it destiny. And generations have paid the price ever since. You see, what's happening today in Gaza, the West Bank, and throughout historic Palestine isn't about religion. It's about power, land, and control. This isn't about Jews versus Muslims. It's about colonialism versus humanity. Palestinians once opened their homes to fleeing Jewish refugees during the war. They fed them, clothed them, gave them refuge. And when the guns turned around, those same families were driven from their homes. That's not ancient history. There are still elders alive today who remember the house they lost, the tree they planted, the street they can no longer walk down. So when you hear someone say Israel has the right to defend itself, ask, defend itself from what? From the people whose land it occupies? From the families it displaced? From the children it bombs? If I steal your house, then shoot you for knocking on the door, who's the terrorist? History is propaganda. History is not propaganda, it's memory. Empires rewrite history to justify their crimes, but the truth doesn't die. It lives in the memory of the oppressed. From Deir Yassin to Jenin, from Sabra to Shatila to Gaza. Today, the story hasn't changed. Of people stolen from, blamed for their pain, and punished for daring to exist. This isn't about religion. It's about justice. And justice doesn't take sides with the powerful. The world cannot bomb its way to peace. It can't claim to defend yourself. You can't claim to defend yourself while standing on stolen land. You can't call it security while building walls through people's homes. And you can't call it democracy while practicing apartheid. Until that truth is faced, not ignored, not sanitized, there will be no peace in the Middle East. Only repetition, only suffering, only the same questions echoing through history. Who's the terrorist? WHGE 95.3 FM. Hope you're enjoying and learning from the open eye. It's interesting. You see people collecting taxes and this, that, and the other, and don't use that tax money to enhance their society. I hear a lot of criticism about Africa, about China going into Africa. I'm going to tell you a difference between the Western colonizer and China. The Western colonizer made sure Africa wasn't developed. When they would build roads and railroads and what have you, they would build them from the resources to the port, and that's it. The hell with the rest of the country. And what's going on right now, especially with the so-called competition between America and China, which country is the real police state? At first glance, the answer might seem obvious. We've been told for decades that China is the face of authoritarianism, strict government, censorship, control. But that's the image painted by American propaganda, not necessarily the reality on the ground. So let's put aside slogans and look at facts. Case in point, China has a population of 1.4 billion people and roughly 1.69 million prisoners. The United States has 340 million people and 1.8 million prisoners. That means America, the so-called land of the free, locks up its citizens at 5 times the rate of China. 5 times. If prison defines a police state, the numbers tell their own story. In the United States, every police officer carries a gun, on or off duty. The result? Over 1,000 Americans killed by police every year, and most by gunfire. In China, the vast majority of patrol officers don't even carry sidearms. Their job is to maintain order, not open fire. Their police don't gun down their own citizens in the street. American police are infamous for rolling in armored cars, wearing battlefield gear, waiting in unmarked cars, and detaining people without identification. We've seen the videos. Masked officers, no names, no badges, just bodies disappearing into the system. That's not protection. That's occupation. In China, police cars are clearly marked with lights on all the time because they are expected to be seen. Their visibility is part of the point. Their purpose, at least in theory, is to assist, not ambush. They don't need to hide behind camouflage to serve their communities. And then there's surveillance. Yes, both nations track their citizens. And here's the difference. China admits to it. Signs literally warn you that you're being watched. In the United States, the government denied it until Edward Snowden pulled back the curtain. Mass data collection, facial recognition, and license plate tracking. Had a cop pull me over a couple of weeks ago. First thing out of his mouth was, well, yeah, I ran your tags. For what? Now, if I had to ask him, now he could pull me out the car. And don't think your cell phone is private, but they're monitoring that. And it's all done without consent, without honesty, and without warrants. In China, the government says it watches you. In America, it says it doesn't while it does. So ask yourself, which country is truly the police state? The one that tells its people what it's doing, or the one that hides its hand behind the flag of freedom? Brother Dardale, I see you there. Okay. Do you know why China can build so many of those futuristic infrastructures we keep seeing? The massive high-speed rail networks, the gleaming ports, and now the world's highest bridge opened just weeks ago on September 28th in Guizhou, in the Guizhou province. You know why? Because China doesn't let billionaires run the show. They don't let private greed dictate public progress. Their government is built around one simple ideal, that national development should benefit the many, not just enrich the few. While here, every project has to promise profits for the shareholders. China builds to connect people, even when a project doesn't pay off right away or if it never pays off. If it helps people, they do it. Take the WHGE Canyon Bridge. This isn't just a record breaker, it's a lifeline. The bridge deck stands 625 meters above the river. It towers nearly 830 meters tall, stretching almost 3 kilometers from end to end. But the most impressive number, it cut a 2-hour drive down to just 2 minutes. That's not convenience, that's transformation. Meanwhile here, some bus trips just in Newcastle County will take you over an hour. Now, before this bridge, families in Gazoo's steep mountains were trapped by isolation. Poverty wasn't just economic, it was geographical. Now Gazoo has over 32,000 bridges. They call it a living bridge museum. Every span, every road, every tunnel connecting people once cut off from opportunity. This is what infrastructure looks like when it's treated as social welfare, not corporate profit. Bridges, highways, railways, subways, not for billionaires, but for the people. The WHGE Canyon Bridge, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, I don't speak Cantonese. It isn't just steel and concrete, it's a promise kept. It's what happens when a nation decides that progress should lift everyone, not just the powerful few. Maybe it's time we ask ourselves, what are we building and for whom and at what cost? Because a bridge isn't just something you cross, it's something you build together. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. WHGE 95.3 FM. I'm Patrice Gibbs. All right. I want to tell you about the hidden danger of fake AI. When technology becomes another weapon against Black lives. Artificial intelligence was supposed to make life easier, smarter, more efficient. But for Black people in America, it's starting to look like another layer of danger. A digital reincarnation of racial profiling coded into the machines. Baltimore's 16-year-old Taki Allen, was just eating a bag of Doritos, not waving a weapon, not causing trouble, just standing outside his school, when suddenly police with guns drawn surrounded him. All because an AI surveillance system called OmniAlert mistook the orange shine of a chip bag for a gun. 8 police cars, guns aimed at a teenager over a snack. Let that sink in. The company said the system did what it was supposed to do. And that's exactly the problem. If this is what it's supposed to do, to criminalize the innocent, to endanger Black youth, then the system is working exactly as designed. We move from Jim Crow to what sociologist Ruha Benjamin calls the new Jim Code. That's when technology designed by people with biases replicates and reinforces those same biases under the illusion of neutrality. Facial recognition systems already misidentify black faces as exponentially higher rates than white ones. Now AI is seeing guns where there are none, but only when the hands holding those objects are brown or black. This isn't malfunction, it's misdesign, a reflection of who gets to code, who gets to test, and who gets targeted. As AI systems are sold as objective, but the data they learn from, surveillance footage, arrest records, online content, is deeply racialized. These systems are learning from biased histories of policing that have always treated blackness as suspicious, dangerous, or just criminal. When the algorithm sees a threat, it's really just echoing what the American justice system has always seen, a young black boy who fits a description. And so when Superintendent Miriam Rogers says the program did what it was supposed to do, she's right in one sense and horrifyingly wrong in another. What it did was reproduce the same racial logic that puts black lives at risk every day. AI policing is not safety, it's surveillance. In communities like Baltimore, AI doesn't represent safety, it represents constant surveillance, an extension of policing into every corner of daily life. Cameras, scanners, predictive algorithms, all programmed to detect danger. They are really just digital overseers watching and waiting for the next false alarm that could cost someone their life. It's not protecting the public, it's protecting the illusion of control. For Taki Allen, the trauma is real. Imagine being 16 years old and realizing you could be killed for holding a bag of chips. That's not something therapy or school counselor can fix. That's a lifelong wound that says every black child, you are not safe anywhere, not even at school. When he says, now I feel like I don't go outside anymore after practice, that's not paranoia. That's survival instinct. Because in America, even a harmless gesture can become a death sentence once filtered through the gaze of a machine trained by bias. We need accountability, not excuses. If a child can't be safe eating Doritos without triggering a police response, then the system, human and machine, is broken beyond excuse. AI can't fix racism. It can only amplify it unless people of conscience intervene. Schools and law enforcement agencies rushing to adopt these systems must be held accountable. There must be oversight, transparency, and consequences. Because every false alarm is a potential tragedy waiting to happen. Artificial intelligence is only as moral as the humans who create it. And in America, where technology has always been used to police and control black bodies, from plantation ledgers to predictive policing, we must ask ourselves, who is AI truly protecting? Because if a Doritos bag can get a black boy cuffed at gunpoint, then AI isn't intelligent. It's just a smarter form of racism. WHGE 95.3 FM. You know, sometimes the stories that reach us through the headlines are more than just stories. They're mirrors, showing us who we are as a society and sometimes who we have allowed ourselves to become. This one is about Sonia Macy. You didn't think I forgot, did you? A 36-year-old black woman from Springfield, Illinois, who did what any of us would do when she felt afraid. She called 911. She called for help. But instead of safety, she was met with death. On July 6, 2024, Deputy Sean Grayson and his partner responded to Sonia's call. She thought there was an intruder in her yard. There wasn't. They entered her home, and at some point, Sean Grayson told her to turn off the stove so nothing would catch fire. Sonia moved a boiling pot of water. She said, "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus." That's something our elders have said 1,000 times. A cry of faith, not a threat. But Grayson shouted back, "You better not, I swear to God, I'll shoot you right in your effing face." That's what this race soldier said. Sonia apologized, cowered into a corner, and that's when he shot her 3 times inside her own kitchen, in her own home. When the prosecution played the body cam footage at trial, witnesses as Grayson covered his ears when those shots went off, as if he couldn't bear to hear what he'd done. His own partner testified under oath he was never afraid of Sonia Macy. The person he feared that night was his own partner. Now we learn this man had worked for 6 different police departments in 4 years. 2 DUIs, kicked out of the Army for misconduct, yet somehow he kept getting hired. Somehow the system said yes every single time. Let's be real. This isn't just about one bad cop. It's about a broken system that recycles danger, that puts guns and badges in the hands of the unfit, that shields the violent and blames the victim. It's about how a black woman calling for help can end up dead, and the same machinery that hired her killer keeps rolling on. This is about America's ongoing contradiction, the idea that law enforcement exists to protect, while for too many of us, has become the source of fear. And here's the truth we keep dodging. Justice can't only mean a conviction in court. It has to mean transformation in hiring, in training, and accountability, and in the value we place on black lives. Because every time another Sonia Macy dies at the hand of someone who swore to serve and protect, that oath becomes a goddamn lie. And our silence becomes complicity. So today we say her name, Sonia Macy. We stand with her family, with every person who has ever dialed 911 and pray for compassion instead of violence. May this trial not just deliver a verdict, but open the nation's eyes to what real justice requires. Because if calling for help can cost you your life, then it's not a policing problem, it's a moral crisis. This is Open Eye. Let's keep it moving. You heard the term full force? Full force. America. The phrase full force is echoing across the nation, and it should chill you to your core. The Orange Disaster announced he's authorizing the deployment of National Guard troops to Portland, Oregon, saying, quote, I am directing Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, whose mama said he ain't nothing, to provide all necessary troops. And I'm also authorizing full force if necessary. That phrase, full force, sounds decisive, strong, even patriotic to some ears. But let's be clear in this context. Full force means lethal force. It means turning the U.S. military on U.S. citizens. And now, as Reuters reports, a divided federal appeals court has given him permission to do it. A 3-judge panel of the Ninth Circuit ruled that Trump can send National Guard troops into Portland, despite objections from Oregon's governor and city leaders. They called it an appropriate response to protests. Where's the police state? But not everyone on the court agreed. The dissenting judge didn't mince words. He wrote that the ruling was, quote, not merely absurd, but dangerous. Dangerous because it opens the door to a president using troops against his political opponents under the guise of restoring order. Dangerous because it normalizes military occupation of American cities. Dangerous because once you unleash that kind of power, you don't easily put it back in the box. Let that sink in. A sitting U.S. president has been told he can use military on the streets of an American city to silence protests. And one judge is standing alone to say that every patriot should be shouting. This is not justice. This is not freedom. This is the road to tyranny. And while politicians and lawyers argue about jurisdiction, statutory authority, and command structures, something deeper is happening on the ground. I recently saw a video that said more than any court ruling ever could. It was a young African-American soldier, uniform pressed, rifle slung across his chest, standing face to face with protesters. His eyes were wet. His head hung low, and under his breath, barely audible, he joined the chant rising from the crowd. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. That young man understood something that people giving orders from Washington do not. Full force means dead black bodies. It means American soldiers being ordered to aim their weapons at people who look like their mothers, their fathers, their neighbors, and themselves. It means turning the tools of war inward against the very citizens who soldiers swore to protect. And that's where this must stop. To every veteran listening right now, to every service member that can hear me, to every guard unit being prepared for deployment, remember your oath. You swore not to a man, not to a political party, not to a wannabe tyrant hungry for control. You swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. That oath means something. It means you do not obey unlawful orders. It means you do not turn your weapon on the people you serve. It means you stand for liberty even when the order coming down tells you to kneel to power. So let me be clear. Don't let the Orange Disaster spill American blood on your hands. Don't let full force become a euphemism for murder. Don't let fear or politics erase the line between defense and oppression. Because once that line is crossed, once the military becomes an instrument of domestic terror instead of national defense, the America we know dies. This moment isn't about Portland, it's about principle. It's about whether we still believe that the government derives its power from the consent of the governed, not the threats of the armed. It's about whether the flag on your shoulder still stands for freedom or whether it's just another uniform patch in service of a dictator's dream. So I say to that young soldier, the one who whispered those words through his tears, hold your head up, brother. You remember what too many have forgotten, that patriotism is not obedience, it's conscience, it's courage, it's love of people more than love of power. And to every listener out there, pay attention. This is not a drill. This is history repeating itself unless we stop it. WHGE 95.3 FM, the Open Eye. Okay. I'm sure by now, you're all aware of the government being shut down and what's happening with that. What's going on with that? Food stamps are cut off. People are going hungry. And the crazy part is I see people celebrating it. Yeah. Actually getting on, well, what are you going to do now? Your food stamps are cut off. Ha ha ha. Let me ask you something. As you watch what's going on, you see the big tax cuts for the rich and this, that, and the other. I gotta ask people who think like that, how small and how cold does your eye have to be to believe the rich don't have enough and the poor have too much? To buy that lie, you gotta look past hunger. You gotta ignore the mother choosing between rent and food. You got to justify the greed of those who hoard what they'll never use. See, the biggest lie ever sold in America was that poverty is a personal failure, not the result of a broken system. It's the kind of propaganda that, excuse me, it's a kind of propaganda that turns compassion into weakness and makes cruelty sound like common sense. Here's the truth. The problem with America is that people who make $700 an hour, that convince people who make $25 an hour, that people that make $7.25 an hour are the problem. That's not economics. That's manipulation. That's how power protects itself, by dividing the people who should be united. We're told billionaires are job creators, while the ones doing the actual work are treated like they're disposable. We're told charity is enough, And what we need is change. A nation that worships wealth and blames the broken for being broken is spiritually bankrupt. It celebrates success and shames need. It confuses greed for greatness and calls empathy naive. But empathy is the heartbeat of humanity. Lose that, and we're not living in a democracy anymore. We're living in a marketplace where even compassion has a price tag. Remember this. The measure of a nation is not how high its riches can climb, but how far its poorest are allowed to fall. Yeah. Coming around to the close here, y'all. Time sure fly. All right. Let me get with this. Yeah. All right. Let me tell you this. What happens when the ship starts to sink? Okay. If the orange disaster sees himself going down, he's not going alone. He's going to try to take the whole country with him. And if history teaches us anything, it's that when men like him don't leave, quietly. He already showed us that. They torched the house on their way out. They poisoned the well so no one else can drink. They turned loyalty into a weapon and fear into fuel. This less than a man told us who he is again and again. He doesn't like our laws. He doesn't respect the Constitution. He mocks the justice system. He attacks the institutions and calls anyone who disagrees with him an enemy of the people. That's not patriotism. That's tyranny rehearsing for its next act. He insults the very citizens he claims to represent, calling Americans fat, poorly educated, stupid, and slobs. He sees the people of this country not as citizens, but as tools, props in his endless campaign for power and vengeance. He doesn't love America, he uses America. And when it stops serving him, he'll destroy it without hesitation. Let's not forget, Trump has always shown more affection for dictators than for Democrats, more admiration for autocrats than for the American ideal. He praises those who silence opposition, jail critics, and rule by fear. Because that's what he wishes he could do here. His eyes light up, not at freedom, but at domination. We're dealing with a man who doesn't just crave control, he craves chaos. When cornered, he will set fires and then blame the smoke on his enemies. When held accountable, he will cry persecution while plotting revenge. Every word, every rally, every witch hunt rant is designed to divide, distract, and destroy faith in democracy itself. So yes, we must be on high alert, because this isn't just about one man's downfall. It's about whether a nation can survive the wrath of someone who cannot stand to lose. He's made it clear, if he can't rule America, he'll ruin America. That's not leadership. That's a national emergency in human form. And history will judge how prepared we were when the alarm sounded. I gotta go over this before I go here. What are we witnessing in Texas? Pay attention. It's not just a redistricting proposal. It's a carefully designed political weapon aimed at resurrecting the spirit of Jim Crow through digital mapping software instead of literacy tests and poll tags. Under this proposed map, white Texans are granted one congressional representative for every 400,000 residents. while it takes 1.4 million Hispanic Texans or 2 million black Texans to achieve the same level of representation. That's not democracy. That's a mathematical form of apartheid, a system that openly assigns different political value to citizens based on race. A Hispanic Texan counts as 1/3 of a white Texan. A black Texan, check the numbers here. A black Texan counts as 1/5 of a white Texan. And the architects of this injustice call it racial neutral. This map is not new. It's the old Confederate playbook rewritten for the 21st century. In the 1960s, Americans marched from Selma to Montgomery to confront precisely this kind of systemic disenfranchisement. And that struggle birthed the Voting Rights Act in 1965, one of the most powerful tools for protecting minority representation ever created. But in 2013, the Supreme Court Shelby County versus Holder decision gutted the heart of that act, removing federal oversight over states with histories of racial discrimination in voting. And Texas was one of those states. And almost immediately, Texas and others began redrawing districts, passing voter ID laws, and closing polling places in black and Latino communities. This new map is the direct descendant of that judicial betrayal, a product of the very void left when the Voting Rights Act was dismantled. The planned oppression, engineering white supremacy through policy. Let's be clear, it's not accidental, it's planned oppression. White supremacists in power have simply traded hoods for high-tech tools. They no longer burn crosses, they draw lines. By manipulating congressional boundaries, they can achieve what violence once guaranteed. White minority rule over a multiracial majority. The numbers tell the story. White Texans make up less than 40% of the population, yet will control 70% of political representation. This is not governance. It's gerrymandered domination. Through statistical suppression, demographic manipulation, and data-driven racism, these map makers ensure that black and brown communities remain politically voiceless, while white conservatives maintain structural supremacy for generations to come. We've seen this before. From Reconstruction's collapse to Jim Crow laws, from poll taxes to mass incarceration, America has always found new ways to deny black citizens full citizenship. Each era updates the tactics but keeps the same goal: preserving white dominance under the guise of legality. This map represents the next frontier in that war, a technological coup against democracy. It is Selma in pixels, Jim Crow in code, and plantation politics dressed up in spreadsheets. The question before us now is not whether we see what's happening, it's whether we will resist it. Because history has shown silence is compliance, and every unjust map drawn in ink will one day be redrawn in blood, protest, and perseverance. This is Open Eye, WHGE 95.3 FM. All right. Coming around to the close here. My children of the sun. Listen, as we bring today's broadcast to a close, remember this. The struggle for truth never sleeps. Every headline, every policy, every whisper of injustice has roots deeper than what the eyes can see. The powerful depend on your distraction, on your silence, and on your fatigue. But we were not born to be blind, nor to bow. Our ancestors lit the path with courage and sacrifice. It's our duty to keep that flame alive. Question everything. Confront lies with knowledge. Defend your mind like sacred ground, because awareness is more than consciousness, it's resistance. So as you step back into the world, hold your head high, guard your spirit, and never let comfort dull your vision. Stay alert to what they hide and stay fierce in what you reveal. Keep your third eye open. And as we always tell you, destiny determines who enters your life, but you decide who stays. Therefore, value those who value you, and don't treat those as a priority who treat you as an option. I'm Patrice Gibbs. This has been Open Eye on WHGE 95.3 FM. Thanks for joining me. Peace. All right. And as I always tell you, global African supremacy. I thank everyone for joining me. All right. See you next time. Peace.